He said the nature of what we had chosen just was not consistent with the project's assignment. And we were just kind of blindsided and, asked for an elaboration on this and what exactly was wrong with what we had chosen. And he said, well, just you can't satisfy our criteria with this product unless you fully redesign the idea of a bra. I mean, subbing out fabric, what is that? That's not an idea. And I said, well, it's exactly what someone's doing with a toaster oven. Our professor said, well, what do you expect? You picked the most non-traditional product possible for this. And I said, Professor, excuse me, but did Queen Elizabeth use a Hamilton Beach blender? I think this is the most traditional thing we could have picked.
Hello, I'm your host, Sam East, and welcome to Diverse, a SWE podcast. Before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to Diverse on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss one of our episodes. Today, I'm here with two collegiate engineers from Columbia University to discuss their tips and experiences around speaking up in labs, in class, in internships, and just overall as women who are studying engineering. Katz is the VP internal at Columbia SWE, and she's a rising senior, studying mechanical engineering with minors in computer science and linguistics. And Lauren Grae, the VP external at Columbia SWE, is a rising junior, majoring in materials engineering and visual arts with a minor in mechanical engineering. And I love that in addition to studying engineering, which is honestly hard enough as is, you both have linguistics and visual arts in the mix as well. Eden, Lauren, I am so excited to be speaking with two very ambitious young women today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we love to jump in to the conversation by asking about your origin story. And we'll start with Eden. Introducing yourselves and sharing how you first got interested in STEM and what led you to join SWE at Columbia.
Hi, so thank you so much again for having me. So my first probably foray into STEM was on my high school robotics team. Me and my best friend decided to join in ninth grade. We were a little scared, but we ended up having the most amazing time. I spent 4 years with the robotics wood shop, auto shop, basically my home. Shout out First Robotics Team 2638. So I spent a lot of time. I learned how to design and build and CAD, which is computer aided design. I really loved just the idea that you could design something, draw something out, draw it on the computer, and then physically build it, and then it could move and become a robot. And it was such an amazing experience. I did have a hard time sort of deciding what I wanted to do going into college. I'm also a huge reader, so I was thinking maybe humanities focused. I still wasn't sure, but I really loved how with STEM, just how big of a difference you can make and just all of the opportunities that are out there. So I decided to major in mechanical engineering. I did keep linguistics in there. I learned Latin in high school, so I've always loved languages. So definitely loved being more of a multifaceted student. And then what led me to join SWE, so on my high school robotics team, there were mostly male members. There were a lot of male mentors. There were definitely some female members, but I feel like we really wanted to form sort of a community. So me and some of my friends started a club called She Has Empowerment, which is She for short, similar to SWE. And we really wanted to engage high school students, girls who were interested in STEM, and we wanted to make them feel comfortable, and we wanted them to have a space with other women who are interested in STEM. And so from there, it really was such a natural path for me to join SWE in college. So I spent a couple years first on the faculty committee, and then last year on the alumni committee, getting faculty and alumni women in STEM from industry and from academia just to come and speak to us. And the members of our club could really hear from a lot of women in STEM and see what that's like in different jobs and stuff. And I'm really excited. This year I got voted to be VP internal. And so that means basically, I guess, just working with all of our G body. So basically all the women in STEM at Columbia and making events just for them. So I'm super excited about that.
That is incredible. Eden, She Has Empowerment. When you started that group, what was the initial reaction? How did people respond to it?
I think, yeah, a lot of the girls we knew were really excited about it. We were seniors in high school, and we really wanted to make sure that we left a mark, I guess, like on our team and our school, and to keep girls interested in STEM after we left. Yeah, so everybody was really excited, and our amazing mentors were really supportive, men and women both. And yeah, it's still going today. And they asked me actually last year to come and speak on a panel on Zoom. So it's just been a really nice experience being able to like give back to my community and to just inspire other girls in STEM.
That is awesome. Lauren, what is your origin story? How you got involved, interested in STEM, and then how that led you to join SWE at Columbia?
I just love that you all call it an origin story. That is such a fun term for it. Kudos to you. I grew up in a Cuban household, which I think I've heard is pretty similar among many immigrant families. There's kind of a holy trinity of professions that's taught to you from a young age: engineer,
Mm.
doctor, lawyer. I love speaking in public when I need to, but that's not really something I'm deeply attracted to. And me and blood are not a good pairing. So honestly, engineer was the natural choice for me. I've always had a deep appreciation for art and just creating in general. I'd love watching Curious George in my abuelo's house after school. And when I found out that what Curious George does of just MacGyvering all these like random objects together is like an actual career, and it's the engineering that I'd been hearing so much about, I was genuinely excited about pursuing it. It was a really pleasant surprise to hear that this thing I kind of picked at random was actually wonderfully fun. And I just fell in love with it from there. I worked on my grandfather's Mustang when I was little. I was always trying to fix the things in our house and make them better. And I get very, very, very frustrated when my mom was upset that I'd taken apart all the remotes in the process of doing that. But it's in the name of science, so that's what matters. But in high school, my freshman year, I was really fortunate to attend an event that Columbia was hosting called the Engineering Exploration Experience by Columbia SWE, where they invite 200 plus high school girls on campus to learn about engineering. And I felt like it was such a great opportunity to hear more about these fields. I discovered my field, materials engineering, during that, and from some really wonderful teachers at my high school. But that's when I really fell in love with SWE specifically, and when Columbia became my dream school. I honestly just worked as hard as I could throughout high school. I had a research experience that I was very fortunate to earn a position with, where I unfortunately encountered a fair amount of sexism in that, which is the story maybe we'll embark on today. But it just really pushed me more so to pursue STEM, because anytime I get angry, I get very motivated. And I was very angry that I was the only woman in this room. And that's why I felt like I'd been marginalized for a variety of reasons. I wanted to change that. And I also have become very involved in the Draw a Scientist project. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that, but if you haven't heard of it, giant plug, it's basically just asking children, to draw a scientist and seeing what they do. And I teach children art on the side. So between that and honestly a great deal of anger, I became extra motivated when I finally miraculously got to Columbia to join SWE. I got to be a part of organizing, and then last year leading the planning of that event that I'd attended as a high school freshman. So it was really fulfilling to welcome almost 300 high school girls myself, and coordinate a variety of keynote speakers. It's a full day, free, immersive event. We got food, every logistical thing you can imagine about spending 9 hours on our campus, I had to organize. And it turned out better than I could imagine. I'm so grateful for everyone's help. And it led to me now this year being Vice President External, where I'll be organizing even more outreach events, bringing our chapter to New Orleans for SWE Conference, which I'm very excited about. Again, many moving parts, many balls in the air, but it all comes back to making something. And I'm really grateful that at SWE we get to make something, with fellow women in the field where we don't always get the best representation, but we're changing that.
Well, Lauren and Eden, you both sound like you're very aware of the circumstances that are leading you down this path. It all sounds very intentional. Lauren, I want to expand a little more on what you said there. It was really profound about how anger had been your catalyst to make sure that you showed up and women in your field were well represented. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I've always kind of looked at it, if you want to use some science terminology, as like limiting variable. One of my high school teachers, when I told her that I was really considering taking the risk and doing art versus science and STEM overall, she told me, look, you can do the STEM, and not everyone in our world can. It's something that needs to be done. And that's when I thought, oh, limiting variable right there. And she said, on top of that, not many women have the chance to. If you can do it, and if you can be successful at it, and I know you can, I really recommend that you do it because it would really just help our world and help women in general. And it stuck with me, not from a point of pressure, but from a point of like purpose, where if this is something we can do, and so many people fight for the opportunity to do it and don't get to, but I have the freedom to, and I can succeed at it, then heck yeah, I should definitely do it.
Hmm. It's always great when you have that person in your ear that's kind of nudging you, right? Whether they
Yeah,
mean to or not, they become a mentor.
definitely. I'm so grateful for her.
So, was there a moment that you can think of? Because the whole topic of today's episode is taking up space as women in STEM, especially at the collegiate level. Was there a moment when you didn't speak up? Maybe that wasn't a class or a lab, internship. And looking back in retrospect, you wish you had. Lauren, do you have a moment like that?
Yeah, I think, well, there's definitely been a few. I'm honestly proud to say that majorly in my short career, anytime there has been a moment where I feel like something's not going the way it should, just for our world, for, equality, I'm a
Hmm.
very vocal person, professional, but very vocal. There have been a few times, especially in class contexts, just because I honestly feel more reticent with professors than I would with employers, where I haven't spoken up and I wish I had. So recently, this past semester, I was taking a class about sustainability and manufacturing, and our final project was to pick a product, any product, and come up with some ways that its manufacturing process could make it more sustainable and overall have a better life cycle impact. And most groups, at our professor's example, when he explained the project, had picked something, for instance, like a toaster oven. And then their change would be sub out the stainless steel for aluminum. And when he was explaining the project, he'd said something like that would be a perfectly acceptable, selection. You analyze it, explain all that. So my partner and I, two of the only girls in a 70 plus male majority class, we picked an underwire bra because it satisfied the criteria of having at least 4 subcomponents. It has more than that. And it had at least 2 different metals. It has nickel and it has titanium for the underwire. So we thought, this is great, this is creative, and we can do a lot with it. During our first review with the TA, it was approved for, just explicitly following the criteria. And then during our second project review with our professor himself, which he had scheduled a week before the final project was due, even though we had pushed for it to be earlier, explained to us that the nature of what we had chosen just was not consistent with the project's assignment. And we were just kind of blindsided and, asked for an elaboration on this and what exactly was wrong with what we had chosen. And he said, well, just you can't satisfy our criteria with this product unless you fully redesign the idea of a bra. I mean, subbing out fabric, what is that? That's not an idea. Subbing out, foam versus underwire, what is that? And I said, well, it's exactly what someone's doing with a toaster oven. And then the closest in this kind of came speaking up, and I wish I'd held myself back a little more, even though we did do well in the project, I have to say, was our professor said, well, what do you expect? You picked the most non-traditional product possible for this. And I looked at him and I said, Professor, excuse me, but did Queen Elizabeth use a Hamilton Beach blender? I think this is the most traditional thing we could have picked.
Ooh, well said.
Thank you. But it was like, I mean, I want to pursue fashion one day. And so it's partially driven by that, but also I really thought we had picked something that more people in the world use than a
Of
Hamilton Beach
course.
blender, a toaster oven.
Yes.
Exactly. I was proud of what we had picked for its alignment with the assignment.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an awesome choice.
Thank you so much. I'm still dumbfounded. He never actually told us what was so non-traditional about one of the most traditional inventions to exist in our history. So instances like that, I'm not even sure how I would have gone about reporting it, especially since the TAs graded it and we got a good grade consequently. I wouldn't have had really any grounds besides annoyance at the review to report him. It just bothers me that individuals like that can continue, having that frame of mind going into engagement with students.
Well, it sounds like you pointed out an inequity in that project specifically, and you called it out, which I can imagine in your position as a student may have been a little daunting, but you felt so passionate about it.
Oh, terrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine, but I'm sure in a sense that may have at the very least made that professor pause and maybe re-examine.
Thank you. I hope so. Let's hope.
We can only hope. Eden, was there ever a time looking back in perhaps a class or a lab or an internship where you wish you would have spoken up?
I was also thinking about this like Lauren, and I do feel like I'm also pretty outspoken when issues come in, especially anything that might appear to be sexist in any way. I do like to speak up. But one thing did come to mind I was thinking about also in class. In mechanical engineering, we have a lot of group projects. It's like working together is a huge deal, and you really get to meet all the people in your year because you're always in a project with somebody at some point. So for a class, last year, a lab class, we were randomly assigned partners, and my partner did not contribute at all to the lab. He was actually a hindrance. He misconnected wires, and then our professor had to come over and help. And later, when we were doing the report, he didn't do any of it. I asked him to do one specific part, and he handed me back a ChatGPT written conclusion. And I was so frustrated and annoyed with this man that I did end up going to office hours and telling my professor, hey, like, he's not doing anything. Like, I'm basically doing this by myself. And his answer was that, well, we used to have a system where people rated their partners, but not this year for some reason. People didn't like it or whatever. So I didn't end up pressing the issue more. I did the whole thing myself, and we both ended up getting the same grade. I felt like it would have been more trouble than it was worth. But, in that moment, I was very frustrated because, I kind of did speak up. It wasn't received very well. I probably could have spoken up more. But, it was his job, our professor, to care about issues like that, among students. And I've heard like many other stories from my peers with similar situations where they have men in their group projects who either don't contribute or the opposite, where they don't let their female counterparts contribute. Yeah. So I think, the classroom and labs and all these spaces, there's a big, there's definitely male and female partnership groups that work really well together, but there's also a lot, I think that has to do with sexism, or maybe just has to do with generally group members not pulling their weight. But I think as a woman, it is hard to speak up when things like this happen to you.
Are you finding that you have to be your own best advocate? Because you mentioned this should have been on the prof, the instructor, the authority figure in that scenario to stand up for you, but you felt that kind of internally, like you had to advocate for yourself. Do you find that you're in a lot of situations where you have to advocate for yourself?
I think so, yeah. I think especially in college, like people aren't going to come up and say, oh, is everybody doing their work? Is it, that people aren't going to be checking for you. And it's really your job to make sure that you're standing up for yourself. And I was able to, even though nothing changed during that class, at the end of the semester, the mechanical engineering department has a review where you can talk to professors, and you can talk to one professor and tell them about anything you'd like to have changed with any of the classes. And then I was able to speak up and say, hey, I think we should bring back that part of the class where you get to rate your partners. And, if they don't do anything, then that gets reflected in their grade. So I guess, right, I did end up speaking up eventually. And I think, yeah, being your own advocate is definitely really important, no matter what you're studying in school or where you are in life.
Mm-hmm. And we don't want to dwell on those moments where you're kicking yourself at how you wish you would have spoken up. But we've all been there where we look back in retrospect and go, oh, I should have handled it that way. Let's celebrate the wins, though. What changed for both of you? Was there a moment that really shifted everything and empowered you to be able to speak up in those moments? Lauren, we'll start with you.
Oh, so many things that I'm really grateful that I can say is so many things. I think, first of all, my principal investigator at our campus, we refer them as PIs, which I know can be confusing for someone who's only heard in a different context. But my PI, she's a powerhouse, just amazing, amazing woman who's had such a successful career. And I remember one time when I was deeply worried about an interview, she told me, okay, I want you to think of it like this. What is the absolute worst case scenario here? What's the best case scenario? And then what's most likely to probably happen? And as she pointed out to me, the worst case scenario is always like, the entire planet implodes. But besides that, if in the case of my interview, it would be, okay, you don't get the job, and maybe they tell someone else that they didn't like you and that spirals or whatever. The best case scenario is, you get the position, you get the job. And the most likely case scenario is something, in this case, in between that. But it's a metric that really helps me personally calm down if I'm considering, do I speak up about this instance? Do I engage? Do I volunteer for, this position that I'm concerned maybe I'm not the most qualified for? Like, what's the worst that would happen? They say no. I put myself out there, and that's worth it. So that mantra has always really helped me. My mom is also, I gotta give her a lot of credit, the most powerful woman I know. She's like a first generation queen that went to law school and is, the definition of an advocate through her job. And she always tells me, put on your big girl panties, handle it. You can do this. And I always hear her voice in my head when I'm worried about something. I'm like, okay, put your hair up, put your big girl panties on. You can do this.
Hey, sometimes that tough love really pulls through, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's honestly, I gotta say with her, it's just love. Like, it's just love. She's so wonderful.
Eden, what about you? Was there a moment, was there a tip that really changed everything for you and how you show up and take up space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if somebody said this to me or if this is just how I've always thought about, I guess, stuff like this, speaking up. But I feel like something I tell myself, when I'm wondering what to do, like, will this help other people, right? Like, if you're wondering, maybe you're in a class and you have a question, but you feel like if you ask it, that'll be awkward. What if people think you're stupid? Like any situation like that, like if me asking this question will give other girls in the class the confidence, to be like, oh, like she's asking her question. Okay, maybe I'll ask mine next, things like that. I feel like that's being able to like lift other people up when I'm scared about doing something. I feel like is definitely a huge, I guess, mindset hack for me. Or even further than that, if somebody's doing something wrong, if a professor is wronging you in some way, or a boss or a coworker or anything, will reporting them or telling somebody about this, will that help people in the future? And usually, yes. So even if it might be scary in the moment, it's definitely a great mindset to have when you're wondering about whether you can speak up.
Yeah, I mean, it plants the seed of possibility, like you said so well. Another woman, perhaps in the group who might have been apprehensive to speak up, sees one of you speaking up, and that empowers them. And then it's like a chain reaction.
Right, exactly.
Completely agree.
Did participating in SWE and building that community help at all with taking up space? Because we hear a lot on this podcast and these amazing conversations that we have about the power of community building through these groups. So can you speak on how being a part of SWE helped out there? We'll start with Eden.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like SWE, especially at our school, is like just a really welcome environment for people to share their stories and to get help from their peers. All of us on SWE board, like our goal really is to help our fellow women in engineering. So when we plan events and when we have like bonding events and all of that, like we really just want people to be lifted up. And I think that mindset and that environment has really, helped me feel confident and hopefully helped others also feel confident.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, what about you?
No, I completely agree with what Eden's saying. Our SWE chapter, it's my favorite club and one of my favorite parts about the school year, honestly. I'm looking forward to going back to it in the fall. We have such a great community of people where it's really difficult often in spaces like this for like that whole idea of, some kind of sisterhood or friendship to feel genuine and authentic, but it truly does. It's also convenient. We meet on Tuesday nights, at least the past 2 years we have, which I think is at the perfect point in the week where, you haven't hit the midway point. So you're still frustrated that the week is even happening. And the Monday exhaustion and then the Tuesday exhaustion have compiled. And there are times when I show up to our board meetings, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't. Why did I choose engineering? Why did I choose STEM? Why am I here on a Tuesday night instead of like just sleeping? I am so tired right now. And everyone's like, that is totally valid. You're so good. I could be like, and I was walking across, the street and the subway was delayed and I wasn't even taking the subway, but I'm mad the subway was delayed. And everyone's like, that's okay. Be mad the subway was delayed. And I'm like, thank you. And it's so, this is
very
like
validating.
story. Exactly. And it's so difficult to find spaces where like we as women especially are able without fear of being accused as like catty and so many things to just like vent and complain. And especially when it comes to instances of genuine inequality, like receive the real validation that we need to know it's okay to speak up. And also sharing each other's stories. When Eden was saying that, how knowing that one person did something uplifts others. One of my friends in SWE, I always remember, it was one of my little baby freshmen, and she was telling me how she finished up like a fall internship thing, and she had ended up having to report someone. And she said, And he found out that it was me, and he looked at me and he said, I bet they're going to add a whole page to the HR manual because of you. And I can't believe I was there. And I looked at her and I said, hey, your name's in the books. You are going to make the lives of so many people after you so much better. If they actually made a whole page, imagine how concrete that is. Like, be so, so proud of yourself right now. You know, we get hugged and cried together and everything. I think having a space to share those kinds of things and talk about terrible people that say those kinds of terrible things to little freshmen that I still want to punch. It's just so important to have, and to know, like, no, you did the right thing. Be proud of yourself.
Mm-hmm. That it sounds like there's been so much meaning in these experiences throughout your journey and your career, and so much more to go. We've covered a lot of the impact on an individual level, how you can take up space in STEM, but how about the bigger structural component at play? We did touch on this a little bit. The, professors, the managers, even SWE sections. How can people in those spaces act as allies to help create more inclusive environments where people can feel like they have a voice and that they are heard? Eden, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think like the most important thing, is to encourage the speaking up, right? When people have questions, when people say something to you in confidence, don't shoot them down, believe what they say. Like all of that is really important. And just giving people the space to ask questions. Like I think, like I've been really fortunate in my past couple jobs or internships to have bosses who actually they really value questions. They don't make me feel stupid for asking like constantly, like so many things, as I'm always confused. It makes the environment such a better, safer place. Like, I just can't even like emphasize like how important that is. I think in any space, don't make people feel stupid for asking for help and encourage questions. Right? Because I mean, without that, then you have people making poor choices, and especially in engineering, like huge problems that have come up have arisen because of people who are too scared to speak out and to say what was on their mind. So I mean, those are things we learn, I guess, like in engineering ethics classes, about how like cultivating like an environment that's welcome to questions and things like that is really important. So not just, I guess, in engineering, in any job, to just give people the space to ask questions and to feel like they can speak up.
Lauren, what do you think? How can allies and leaders make better choices to help people feel included, women in particular feel included in STEM spaces?
I completely agree with what you said about communication being so important, because really the way we speak, about ourselves and to others represents and holds so much meaning. And I think the phrase, she just said that, should enter everyone's vocabulary to start with.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Ooh, snaps for that. Snaps for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I gotta give complete credit. So one of my mentors, a male grad student in my lab, he's defending in a few weeks. So let's, fingers crossed for him, but he's gonna do amazing. And that was very clearly in his vocabulary. Like anytime a visiting researcher would say to our principal investigator professor, completely demean her idea, this grad student, who's just as junior in that case as I am, would say, actually, our professor, she just said that. Or if we were in a meeting with another lab and, those individuals would shoot down my idea, and then the next breath, even if it's completely unconscious, and I want to believe maybe it is, would essentially reiterate my idea, he would always, always turn around and say, Lauren just said that. And I completely agree. She did have a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And he's such an amazing example of how easily and even politely, because he's one of those individuals that speaks and you're like, oh, he's so nice, because he is, that you can politely incorporate that into conversations too, without it being confrontation, without it even being, any kind of big deal. It's just the facts. That person just said that. Let's acknowledge it instead of trying to rephrase it, reclaim it. And that goes across genders, really. I think everyone should get credit for their ideas, but especially when it comes to women in STEM, that needs to start.
Oh, I love that so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Before we send you two off, for other women in college, in engineering, who are still figuring out how to take up space, to speak up, what advice, we'll start with Lauren, would you give to them to take the first step?
I would just say, first of all, you don't have to put the pressure on yourself that, thinking of every girl that comes after you. Think, of course, of the women that are going to come in your spot next, but that's not completely on you. Think about the people that you can talk to first, that you can share that with. Think about the resources that I hope have been communicated to you. And if not, reach out to others because we will give them to you. But just make sure to know where you can turn and that you're not alone, because that's the scariest part. And then if you do spiral into that pressure, it doesn't help. So take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of others, because that self-care is so important.
It's kind of like when you're on a flight and they're like,
Yeah,
put
exactly.
on your life vest before you help the kid beside you.
Exactly. And, we all know we probably are still going to help the kid beside us with the life vest
Yeah.
first, but
Yeah.
remember yourself too, please.
Eden, what about you?
Yeah, just like that is so important, to recognize your community. And I was just thinking, like, as a woman in engineering, the best part of being a woman in engineering is that your experiences are so recognized by your fellow women in STEM. Like, even if you go into a class or into a new job or into like an internship or anything where you don't really know somebody, and you look to, even if it's somebody more senior than you, or they'll just get it. I don't know. That's like one of your best resources is, if you have a problem or you're just having a bad day, is, to communicate to your other women in STEM, fellow women in STEM, I think is, we're so powerful. I think that's especially my favorite part of being in engineering are my friends here at school who are also women in STEM. They lift me up, and if there's something that I'm worried about speaking about and I'm not sure if I should, I always go to them first. And I think that's a resource that hopefully everybody is lucky enough to have.
This has been an awesome, empowering conversation. I wish I had friends like you too when I was in
Oh,
college.
thank you.
That
We'd like to be friends with you.
no, that was incredible. And honestly, a lot of these insights, it's been a long time since I was in college, but I will carry them on. I think they apply to all industries, truly. So I appreciate so much. We all do what you've shared, Lauren and Eden. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you for having us. Really enjoyed it.
I'm Sam East, and from all of us at SWE, thank you for listening.